for turning off your phones and any other kind of mobile devices that you might have. Is it all right if they take pictures of you?
Only from this angle.
So yeah.
I have to have my hair on my face, and there can be no fat. So if you guys want to take pictures, you have to. Lori, could you just take a picture from that side? You're motioning your. Okay, yeah. Thank you for it.
So welcome everybody. It's so lovely to see all of you here. I'm Susan Dubin. I'm the librarian here at the Holocaust Resource Center. And we are so happy and proud and excited to welcome Joanne Gilbert as she's launching this wonderful new book about Miriam Brisk, one of our heroes, that we talk about in all of our classes. So we're so glad that both of you are here. And Joanne is a very well-known author. She lectures all over the world. She spoke in Lithuania. She spoke in Canada. She spoke all over the United States. If you haven't heard her, you haven't been listening. So this is your chance. She is one of our perennial presenters at the Resource Center. We teach classes to teachers in the Clark County School District, as well as giving programs to the public. And Joanne is somebody I can always count on when I call and say, can you come and talk about, and she definitely can talk about whatever it is. She has several books that she's published. Two of them are here, Women of Valor, the Polish Resistance, and
Post-Jewish resistors to the Third Reich.
yes,
Julia, bring me one.
thank you, and
Bring me the. Hold on, hold yourself.
and then you may know that the actual book that she's going to be talking about today is A Victory for Miriam. This is a brand new book. It is just here. And we hope you will take the opportunity to read it because it is wonderful. It will give you a lot of information about a personal story that's written on a level that is appropriate even for young people to read. So I will be using it with my teachers that I'm going to be working with, and I hope that many of you will share it with young people that you know, as well as enjoy it yourself. So I am not going to take any more of your time because I know that Joanne has a wonderful presentation to share with you. So please welcome Joanne Gilbert.
Thank you. And in parentheses before I start, where's Laura? Laura, we need PowerPoint to work. Oh, thank you. Just hold it there. All right. Greg, can you hear me?
I can hear you so far.
Thank you.
So far.
Greg is my son. He's been hearing me since before he was born. And I'm so grateful to have him here with us today, along with my granddaughter. And I want to thank you all for coming as well. I know it's a very busy, busy day, and there were many things that you could have chosen to do. This is an amazing, amazing presentation of Miriam Brisk's memoir, A Victory for Miriam. And as soon as we have a PowerPoint, I can't do that.
Yes.
So, how's that?
Better.
Take two.
All right. Okay, again, I want to thank you for coming now that you can hear me. And I'm very grateful that Miriam, who's the little girl in the book, flew all the way from Ann Arbor along with her wonderful husband, Henry, to be part of our book launch today. As you will learn as we go through the presentation, Miriam is a person that doesn't let obstacles stop her. When something gets in her way, she figures out what to do with it, and she just keeps on going. Nothing stops her. Another important thing to know about Miriam is her amazing, lifelong dedication to Holocaust education and remembrance, for which we are very grateful. So before I continue with the presentation, I would just like to welcome my friend, my writing partner, Miriam Brisk. Would you We're going to crowd now. I think it's also important to give a round of applause for the person who made much of what Miriam does possible. So Henry, would you stand up? Many of you know that we have a wonderful artist and therapist, Javi Brisk-Mandel, in Las Vegas. So Javi, who is their daughter? If you've ever written a book with someone, you have access to a part of their heart that other people don't have. It's a very intimate, a very private relationship, and it involves great trust. I'm so grateful and honored that Miriam has trusted me, not just with this book, but with 3 previous books. That's saying something, and I'm very, very honored. In addition, when you help someone write a book, you end up loving whoever it is they love. You become part of their emotional zeitgeist. And so the first time that I met Javi years ago, she didn't know I already loved her. Imagine how weird, it's kind of creepy when some strange woman comes up to you and gives you this big hug, I love you so much, because she doesn't know that I had been going through her mom's childhood and her mom's pregnancy and everything to do with her family. So if I ever do a book for anybody in your family, just be on guard. You're liable to feel loved by a stranger. That's just the result. So thank you for your understanding. A victory for Miriam could not have happened, one, of course, without an amazing, compelling story, but without the help of many, many people. They say it takes a village to help bring up a child. Well, our team of helpers is almost a village in itself. And so without clapping for everybody, because it would take too much of your afternoon, I would like to acknowledge some of the members of our team, and then we can clap after they've all been acknowledged. Let's start with Will over there. He's taking a picture of himself because he does videography and photography and a lot of tech stuff. We're very grateful for that. Is Anya here? Anya Wilcox? Well, we won't thank her then. I want to thank Terry Ryan, who's in the back somewhere. And Terry has been my moral support for every project that I've done since I moved to Las Vegas. Whatever he's doing, he stops whenever I need help. I would like to acknowledge my granddaughter again, because when she was 12 and I told her the story of Miriam, she went to another room and she was very quiet. Normally that's a moment when you get nervous. Like, my kid is not here and she's quiet. My grandkid is not here, it's a scary time. What she did was she drew a design for the cover that she came up with on her own, and it's evocative of the David and Goliath motif. And she was 12. I felt very outclassed. We then hired Anya Wilcox and Angel Luna, a local artist, to put it together professionally. So every single page has a big story attached to it. So I'm grateful to my granddaughter for that. Okay. Every book has roots that, if you want to take the metaphor that create the branches and the leaves, it's a big deal to know what happened before the book was written. Miriam and I are not John Grisham. We're not Danielle Steele. We're just two people who believe in the importance of Holocaust remembrance and that remembrance should be based on fact.
I'm so sorry. I didn't even know I had it.
That's okay. When I was teaching, if a phone went off, the whole class got a quiz. You got to give your choice, push-up or quiz. Some of the boys would deliberately have their phone go off so that they could show off how they could do push-ups. On today, the 81st anniversary of Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, those of us who are familiar with Jewish history have a sense of solemnness in our hearts. For those of us who are educators, Holocaust educators, we also think it's important, as we commemorate our losses, to celebrate our wins, to celebrate our heroes and heroines. And as Miriam and I were working on our previous books, we have many discussions about who is telling our kids, who's telling everybody about Jewish heroes and heroines. What did you, don't answer this, it's rhetorical. But if you think back to when you were growing up, maybe you knew two names, Anne Frank and Elie Wiesel. Very, very important. You didn't know about anybody who fought and survived. We knew martyrs, we knew victims. But there's a bigger truth to Jewish history than just the horror of the Holocaust. There are other stories in our narrative. And Miriam and I thought we were finished when we finished our previous book. And we started talking, and we realized we had one more book to do, and it was a book about a little girl who fought. She was fierce and fearless, even though she was scared all the time. And we're grateful to be able to add her story to the narrative of Holocaust history. For those of you who are unaware, Kristallnacht, the night of November 9th and 10th, 1938, throughout Germany, which at that time included Austria and included the Sudetenland portion of Czechoslovakia. It was a night of government-sponsored terror. There would not be any question around the world about what the Nazis had in mind. They vandalized, defiled, and burned Jewish property, synagogues, schools, stores, businesses, houses, whatever they could find. And if you happen to have been a Jewish person out on the street that night, you got beaten up or killed. Approximately 100 people were killed that night, and thousands of buildings were destroyed. Following that, many of the people who owned that property were charged by the government for the repair of their burned down buildings. When I was growing up, a baby boomer, do we have any baby boomers in the audience? We all know the same stuff. We all know that when we were kids, Eisenhower was the president, and we felt pretty secure about that. We felt pretty secure that we probably were not going to be attacked. We also were the first generation to have television, and we were on Saturday mornings. If I say Princess Summer Fall, what do you guys say? Winter Spring. It's like Manchurian Candidate, we're all programmed. We all know how we do. And how many of us can still do the hula hoops? Our lives were pretty innocent. American baby boomers after the war. Our parents were glad that the Depression that they grew up in was over, and they were glad that World War II was over. It was, for many people, a happy time. We were the first generation to have sugar frosted flakes and Tony the Tiger. Of course, we now know that sugar frosted flakes are toxic and bad for us, but we were eating those suckers night and day. But if you grew up in a Jewish community, all of the American iconography that we share now also included knowledge of people who might have had numbers on their forearms, might have had old discs that they had worn around their neck with numbers. If you grew up in a Jewish community, whatever happiness you had was overshadowed by the phantom of the Holocaust legacy. So if I grew up and was good at something, let's say singing, my grandmother would say, "Oi, my sister, she could sing like a bird," before Hitler got her. If you were bad at something, of course that never happened in Jewish families, but if you were bad at something, like maybe you were a guy and you cut class, my grandmother might say, "Oi, my little brother Sammy, you couldn't trust him as far as you could in Yiddish, as far as you could throw him. He is just like my little brother Sammy," before Hitler got him. We shared this legacy while we were using our hula hoops. It was just part of our normal day. My parents were Americans, but my grandparents were not. My grandmother, Michla Weinman Ron, got out in 1915, at a time when Jews in Eastern Europe only had to worry about the Cossacks, the anti-Semitic Poles, the anti-Semitic Ukrainians, the anti-Semitic Lithuanians. It was like a Fiddler on the Roof village. You never knew when they were going to come, have a pogrom, or an action, or a riot, and wipe your neighborhood out. But my grandmother got out early. Running from those people, she was able to get to the States and bring with her photo albums. And I was lucky enough to have her until she was 103. So if you have kids, it's a really cool thing to do is take a picture of them now, and then take a picture in the same pose, like in 5 years, in 10 years, because how precious is this if it was an accident? So just a little tip. When I was little, instead of listening to fairy tales, I would look at the old photo albums that my grandmother brought with her. Remember the smell of those old black pages as they crumbled, musty, a little moldy? I didn't want any fairy tales. I wanted to see pictures of all of these relatives that I never had. And she would tell me about my great auntie Rivka, and her mom, Sarah, and a sister whose name I have forgotten. And my grandmother would tell me, "You're just like my little sister Rivka," and she would tell me she liked to sing, she liked to dance, she liked to teach, she was fun, all these wonderful things. And what that resulted in was, somehow I knew that I was living the life that Rivka didn't get to live. So I couldn't really ever be bad, although I was on the fringes a lot. But I was always conscious of whatever I was doing. And many of you share this, if you are children of Holocaust survivors or related to victims. We got a life that they didn't get to have. And when I was growing up, I had two questions as my grandmother was going over all of these stories. What, didn't anyone help? I couldn't imagine American baby boomer living in the suburbs. Are you kidding me? My neighbors wouldn't help. Someone would just come and take me out, send me somewhere. That's impossible. And I would say, did they fight? For those of us at the beginning of the women's movement, it's inconceivable to think that populations of women would just go along like sheep to the slaughter. Impossible. What do we know? American spoiled kids. When I would ask my grandmother those questions, she would just open her hands, she would get tears in her eyes, and she would say in Yiddish, "Ich weiß," I can't even do it anymore. Somebody say it. I don't know. Ich weiß nicht. Thank you. Now, if I were in a church, I might not get help with pronunciation. And so I have the dubious honor of loving my grandmother, begging for stories every weekend when I stayed with her that I knew would make her cry, which was the beginning of my career as a comedian. After I made my grandmother cry, I had to cheer her up. What my grandmother planted in me, we didn't know, was a drive to be able to find the answers to those questions. Did they fight? Did anyone help them? The result of that was my first book, Women of Valor, Polish Jewish Resistors to the Third Reich. You might have the first edition from 2014 with a slightly different title. This is the updated, much better, definitely worth buying again, new second edition. And it is a prize winner, which was quite gratifying. While I was doing research for this book in the States, in Canada, in Europe, I found the faces of so many women who were anti-Nazi resistors. And if you look at them, they look like us. Nothing ever changes. And I was honored to be able to meet several of these women. But the whole time I was doing it, I never dreamed that one day a little girl would be one of those resistors, and that she would come into my life and my heart and be there today. Miriam and I first met when a publisher that I was doing editing work for called me and said, I've got this book I think you'll be interested in. And I read it, and I was totally enchanted. This was Miriam's first memoir, and I'm honored to have been her editor on it, and it won 3 prizes. But that wasn't enough. Miriam then went on, along with Margaret Langer, to write a Holocaust art education book, which meets the standards of various states. And if you're at all interested in art education, it's a really fine book. I'm happy to have been able to edit it. And even if you're not an educator, the stories that go with the artwork are wonderful. Miriam then, because she had only had a career as a scientist and a medical school professor, she then decided it was time to become a poet. And she created a beautiful book of poetry etched in my memory. And again, I was honored to be able to do a few little edits on that. As I said before, when we were through with those books, we thought we were done, but we realized that there was a book that still needed to be written. And it was a book that expanded on the childhood of a little Jewish girl who was not a victim, and who, after the Holocaust was over, created a life. That wasn't the end for her. She created an amazing, long, loving, productive, meaningful life, all the time dedicated to Holocaust remembrance and education, for which we are very grateful. Her story starts in Warsaw, beautiful Warsaw, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And on September 1st, 1939, her little, safe, middle-class life was completely shattered. Her childhood was ended with the Blitzkrieg, when Germany bombed Warsaw. Her father was a surgeon, which will be important in her story. Because in her story, after the Blitz, she and her mom had to run across Poland to the Soviet sector, a little place called Lida, where they lived for several months before the Germans broke their pact with the Soviets, and they ended up in the Lida ghetto. In the middle of one night, some partisans, the fighters who were in the forest, came to the ghetto, and they found Miriam's dad, Dr. Myasnik, and they said, "Hey, Doc, we need you in the forest because we need some surgeon to take care of other wounded and sick partisans and other people who are sick." Now think about that for a moment. You're living in a ghetto, it's pretty awful, and somebody comes and tells you, "We need you to go right now to the forest and be the doctor in the forest, in a swamp, in bad weather." What he said was, "Fine, but I'm not going unless I can take my wife and my little girl." And the partisans said, "No way, we don't take women, we don't take little girls, we're just taking you." But Dr. Myasnik could not be swayed, and there they were, after curfew, dangerous to be outside, kind of negotiating, and finally, the partisans gave in and said, "Fine, take them." And so he had to go back to his house that they shared with many people in the ghetto, and they had to sneak out. And they had to cross frozen rivers, and they had to go through mountains, and they finally got to the forest where they joined Soviet partisans. Most people don't know about the Soviet partisans, but they were fierce warriors, and many of them were anti-Semites. And in the forest, Dr. Myosnik treated people who were horribly wounded, who were sick from the terrible diseases like typhus, and they eventually built a hospital in the middle of the swamp. When we look around at the projects that don't get built today because there's too much of a hassle, and you think about this man organizing the building of a hospital, much of which was underground, in a swamp, in a forest, during the Holocaust. It's unimaginable. I'm not going to go through all of Miriam's experiences because it's part of the book, and I hope that you will read it. One of our challenges was there were no photos of that time in that place. And I was fortunate enough to meet Angel Luna. Is Angel here? Angel Luna, a local artist who was so touched, and he's just walking in. I'm going to repeat that. I was lucky enough to meet Angel Luna, a local artist whose work you might have noticed on the round table in the lobby. If you haven't, please do take a look at it. I told him Miriam's story, and like anybody else who has heard it, his heart was so touched by that story that he agreed to create artwork for the chapters where there were no images. But Angel took it one step further. And he created that artwork using the same tools that Miriam might have used if she had been making art in the forest. And you'll see those tools, Michelle, the tools on the table. You'll see the tools on the table that he used, rags and gravel and sticks, to create that artwork, to represent Miriam's life in the forest. This image is of Soviet partisans. One of Miriam's adventures, if we can call it that now, was after liberation. They were then living in the Soviet sector, and while the Soviets weren't like the Nazis, they sure weren't very friendly, and there were a lot of restrictions on life. They were not free. And Miriam's parents decided they were going to have to go on the run. At one time, Miriam, who hadn't really been in school yet, was walking down the street. She's used to being a partisan. She's got to check out the terrain. What's going on out here? And she was carrying a holster with a gun that she had been given for her 9th birthday. And she came across a Soviet soldier who looked down at her and said, "Yo, what's up with the gun?" And she told him she was a partisan and she had to carry a gun. She could not be without that gun. And so he said, "Well, you're going to turn it over to me now." And Miriam, for the first time that she could remember, cried. She felt on one hand that she was betraying the partisans by giving up her weapon. When she went home and talked to her mom said, "It's okay, the Soviets need the weapons on the Western Front." And so that made her feel better that it was going to be useful. Miriam is very prolific. When she's not being a scientist, when she's not being a professor, when she's not being a writer, she's also a graphic artist, and you will see some samples of her work throughout the room. And this is one of her exhibits. Her pieces are in museums and galleries and in private collections, and they're quite powerful. This one is the children of the Holocaust. Another one of her collections is Scroll of Remembrance. And in the confined silent, I'm going to sit on this one for a minute because it's so powerful. The image of the mother and the child in front of the ghetto walls. Often those ghetto walls were made of tombstones from Jewish cemeteries. Because you don't just have blocks like that laying around. When you look at her work, there'll be a surface image and then layers and layers of other images and other meanings underneath. Her most recent collection is different because at this time of her life, she is seeing the love and the beauty that is in her world, and she has decided to create a collection celebrating life. So I'm already going into Life Like I Am. I'm sure some of you already have that song. I just wanted to say that out there. Look at the joy in this picture. When I saw it, I was taken by the fact that the cover of our book has the back of a little girl facing a swastika. She didn't even know the cover of our book would do that, and that motif is reflected only with joy in her most recent piece called Elation. Here's an image of Miriam going through her book Stones, which I thought was quite beautiful. I'm going to tell you a story about this. One of the teachers in the program that Susie runs to get teachers credentialed to teach about the Holocaust in Clark County is Sarah Melvin. Where's Sarah? Sarah has gone through the whole program and now is one of the teachers, and she's quite amazing. And not just because she uses my book, which I thought was pretty special. To show you what a small world it is, Susie has a friend in Ann Arbor who is the head coach of the women's hockey or something. Field hockey team. Is that obscure? The U of M ladies field hockey team. And her friend happened to call her and said, you know, Sarah, you've been doing all this Holocaust stuff. I'm going to be traveling and I need a book to read. Can you recommend one? And I wasn't even there. She's already got that in her head, Joanne's book. And she said yes, and she recommended Women of Valor. And the woman read the book and loved it, yeah? And loved it so much that she investigated to find out where little Miriam lived, which was also Ann Arbor. And when she found out that Miriam lived in Ann Arbor, she called Sarah and she said, do you think I can go meet Miriam? So Sarah called me. It was just like playing operator in kindergarten. So Sarah called me and I called Miriam, and Marcia, in fact, went over and spent an afternoon with Miriam because of the book. A few weeks later, I was hoping to get some video of Miriam that Will has put together in a video loop that will be on the TV in the back. I didn't know anyone in Ann Arbor that I could impose on, so why not Marcia? So I asked Sarah to ask Marcia if she would go back and visit Miriam again, and with one hand do a phone with the video and ask these questions. And she did. And it's the most beautiful series of video vignettes that someone I have never met took with Miriam. It was a very precious afternoon. When I looked at the video, and I paused it and did a screenshot, whatever, because I was so taken by that particular image. And that's how that came to be. We have another small world here. Tammy Sherman, who's over here, lives in Sun City, as do I, is married to Kevin, who went to the same high school that I did in Oak Park, Michigan, the Jewish suburb of Detroit. Tammy just saw the cover of one of the books. It was co-written by Margaret Gigi Langer, who she knows from back in Detroit. And she came up and just talked to Miriam. One of my presentations in Detroit many years ago, I was talking about Manya Feldman, one of the women who was there that day. And it turned out that there was a man her age, about 94, who had come from the same shtetl, the same village that she had, and who happened to be in that audience because his sister was my mother's best friend from when they were 5 years old. Go figure that. Here they were, they had more in common with each other, these two 90-year-olds who hadn't seen each other since before the war. One more small world. One of my earliest influences was the mother of a close friend of mine when I was 10. My friend, Sunny Fenster, lived a couple of blocks away, and I would sleep at her house all the time. Her mother was so kind to me, and she made a powerful impression. And she was a Holocaust survivor, as was Sunny's father. I hadn't seen Sunny in 55 years, and I hadn't seen Lillian since I graduated high school. And it just so happens that our prestigious Black Mountain Institute has a fellows program for scholars and artists. And one of the fellows that's at the BMI Institute this semester is Amy Kurzweil. Amy Kurzweil, who is Lillian's granddaughter, who I never would have met, who is also a noted cartoonist for the New Yorker and has written books herself. So when you talk about the circuitous routes that life brings us on, how joyful to be able to talk about a woman who inspired me to do the work I do and have her granddaughter be in the room. How does that happen? Okay, enough of that. And so, from a little girl in a Jewish suburb of Detroit, a baby boomer who was born into a country that was exuberant with its victory in war, but had little pockets of phantom sadness for people who had been touched by the Holocaust. I am grateful that I lived long enough to be in my third act, to be able to be a Holocaust educator, to be able to meet these amazing women, and to share their stories with all of you. A Victory for Miriam was a book we think had to be written, and we hope that you will think it's a book that has to be read. And now I would like to officially introduce Miriam Brisk.
I'm more used to talking from a podium, so if you don't mind. I want to thank Joanne for working with me together to get this book out on my life. There's a lot more in it than she just discussed, tons more of very powerful stuff, and all of it is expressed beautifully. I would like to, in addition to supporting the book, if I may read a poem or two from my poetry book. I wrote that book crying. I listened to Yiddish music at the time I was writing the book, and the tears were flowing down my cheeks. And it was done with so much feeling and so much love for all those who perished. And so I just want to read you a couple of poems, if I may. This was not written poetically, this was written, the idea was to tell the story. This poem is called In the Memory of Stones. And what happened was after I retired and I came to Ann Arbor, I went back with Professor Gittleman to visit the ghettos and camps in Eastern Europe with a group of American Jews from the Detroit and Ann Arbor area. And most of them were interested in the famous rabbis and all. They really weren't into the Holocaust stuff. And I cried my way through the entire trip, and they couldn't understand why I was crying. And so this was an event that occurred on that trip. With anxiety and fear, I returned to Poland, to the ghettos and killing fields of the Soviet Union, to death camps, Treblinka, Majdanek, and Auschwitz. Memories and emotions flooded me with terror, recalling near-death moments of my own survival and the massacre of my family and 6 million Jews, the agony of their lives and the terror of their deaths, walking on stones and remember their steps. I lifted a stone from each road I traveled. Do you remember them, I asked of each one? What could I expect from an inanimate object, any more than from killers with hearts made of stone? Memorials of stone scattered in Treblinka, carved with the names of cities and of countries, all that is left of nearly 1 million victims. A giant stone monument for the Jews of Warsaw, a stone for Janusz Korczak and the children he died with. Where were you, my God, when they trod their last road? Eyes raised to heaven, they called out your name. Their yearning souls pleaded for your mercy, their pleas unheard by the stony hearts of men. Cruel men bent on destroying the last remnants of a people broken in spirit and forsaken by all, their bodies poisoned and burned into ashes, or shot into mass graves of Babi Yar and Payar. As a survivor, I continue to cry for them. I honor the 6 million in every way I can. On Yom Kippur, I light 6 yahrzeit candles, and with tears in my eyes, I say Kaddish for them. And this is the last poem of the book. It's called An Authentic Life. As a Holocaust survivor approaching 80, now I'm approaching 85, in the terminal tapestry of time, how shall I live out my remaining years in the ephemeral and mysterious future? Reveling in the joys and pleasures of being, hugging my children and grandchildren, being a mensch with love and compassion on a spiritual journey with a purpose to life. Ever investing my time with new meaning, gaining new insights from living it fully, endeavoring and striving, being and bringing into being, living every day with zest and with passion, with spontaneity and creativity. It is this stubborn pursuit of my dreams that has endowed me with the power to create, from my dream of becoming a scientist and exploring the mysteries of nature, to that of a Holocaust artist portraying the suffering Jews, to my dream of being a writer, describing the emotions who are dying. It has taken courage and to share my experiences, learned over painful and turbulent years, recalling painful memories of fear and of death, and gaining my dignity by transcending the past. In 2001, I returned from my career as a medical school professor in 3 departments of the University of Texas Medical Branch, publishing some 85 peer-reviewed studies, and moved back to Ann Arbor, Michigan to live closer to my family. 3 of my grandsons were attending the University of Michigan at the time. In 2002, I went back for the first time to view the ghettos and camps of Eastern Europe with a group of local Jews led by Professor Gittelman. I cried my way through the entire trip as the memories of my own childhood, surviving the Holocaust and losing most of my family, hit me really hard. When visiting the Treblinka death camp, where the Jews from Warsaw and my own family perished, I made a pact with God that I would spend the rest of my life doing creative work to remember the Jews who perished in the Shoah, including my own family. I also wanted to preserve the actual faces of the victims, which necessitated doing digital art on my computer, which I taught myself to do. I purchased dozens of books from Yad Vashem to expand my knowledge of the Holocaust. Even though I had no art training, I taught myself how to do art. Scientists learn, teach themselves all the time. What followed next were 3 major art exhibits in a confined silence over 40 pieces on individual Jews who perished. A second exhibit, Children of the Holocaust, on the children who perished. And a third, Scroll of Remembrance, on entire Jewish communities who died. I have had some 40 solo art exhibits of my Holocaust art and several pieces hanging in Yad Vashem. What followed next were 3 books on the Holocaust. They were edited by Joanne Gilbert. Amidst the shadows of trees, my memoir received the gold medal for Best Adult Nonfiction from the Florida Authors and Publishers Association, Best Narrative Nonfiction Award from the New England Publishers. Then the book The Stones Weep, an art book that received the Book of the Year Award and Academic Award from the New England Publishers. I also wrote, etched to my memory, a poetry book. I wrote the book while listening to Yiddish songs, and I just read you 2 of those poems. Joanne Gilbert helped edit those books in a way that would make them most readable. We became good friends. About 2 years ago, I realized that there was one important book to write, one for younger children in middle schools, one that I didn't know how to write, as I had never experienced a normal childhood, either in Europe or in America. As an ignorant immigrant, I knew very little English, and it took a lot for me to catch on in English and all the other subjects I never had. And despite coming here at the age of 12, knowing nothing, I graduated high school at 17 and college at 20, went on to get my master's at the University of Michigan, my PhD at Columbia University, and eventually, it was a time when women were not wanted in science, so it took me a while to finally get my job. And so I called, when I thought about it, I called Joanne to say, we need to write a book that's good for children. And so I called her to work together and to write it in a format that children could relate to. I am thrilled with the book and hope you will learn from it and tell your children to read it as well. I also hope some of you will be inspired to read my other books as well. Thank you so much for this.
As we come to a close, I want to once say we do have some books to sell in the back. If we run out, which would be wonderful, we'll take your name and I will get the books to you as soon as they're delivered to me. I also want to take a moment to give a big thank you to Laura Engel-Sar in the back who checked you in. Laura has pretty much put her life on hold these last couple of weeks to do all the detailed work for this particular event. I'm very, very grateful. I call her my tranquilizer. Instead of taking pills, I call Laura and she takes care of what needs to be done. We're going to have a Q&A, a question and answer time, and then after that's over, I'll meet you in the back. Hopefully the video will be running, yeah, Will is in charge of that. And meet each other. There are some amazing, amazing people in this group, and I'm so blessed to have you in my life. Thank you so much for being here. And now, are there any questions? Yeah. Sharon.
Is there a way that people can buy the books and donate it to schools that can't afford to purchase it?
That is a great question. It was. Is there a way for people to, on their own or with another person or 10 other people, buy class sets of the books that the Holocaust Resource Center can then donate to underprivileged schools? And yes, Susie, did you say who you were when you welcomed everybody? Susie runs the Las Vegas Sperling Kronberg Mac Holocaust Resource Center that's housed right here in the synagogue. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure she'll be glad to show it to you after the presentation is over. She has been kind enough to offer to partner so that if people want to make donations for class sets, one anonymous person has done so already, we will be able to select as many underprivileged schools as we have books for to donate a class set. Many of us in the community here, there's no Holocaust education going on. And while Nevada doesn't mandate Holocaust education, we do have an Governor's Advisory Council on Holocaust education. And we have many, many dedicated teachers who go through Susie's program. It would be lovely if we could provide the books for their schools. So if anybody, even if you don't read, and even if you don't have anyone that you want to give a gift to, you might want to donate a class set of books to an underprivileged school. Thank you, Sharon. Another question? Mitch?
It's also in school, we just went down to our school and taught. I met Joanne when she came to my school, and the kids loved her, and she stayed all day. Actually, she came twice, I think, in the same year, but she couldn't get all the classes at once. So thank you for that. Hopefully you'll be coming again this year. Are there any other events you're doing for this book?
Thanks. Before I answer, Mitch asked if there were any other speaking events, and yes, there are. Mitch is one of the teachers that has gone through Susie's program. He has not only dedicated much of his life now to Holocaust education, he has also done 2 amazing trips. Mitch, tell us your trips this summer.
Well, one was I went to Germany for 2 weeks and we traveled around. This is a teacher's program, but the most amazing trip I had was I spent 10 days at Yad Vashem. And we just had these amazing instructors, and for 10 days we were there in our classroom.
For people who don't know what Yad Vashem is,
Yad Vashem is the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem. And just to be able to walk there and have these scholars come and talk to us daily from 9 to 5 was just one of the most amazing experiences in my life, which, you know, if you have 10 hours, we'd love to talk to you about it.
and he'll be in the lobby
Yeah,
after the show.
and it was just, I feel so lucky to be able to do that, and I just want to come back and share with my students.
Thank you, Mitch, for your commitment to Holocaust education. Mitch is one of the teachers, along with Sarah Melvin, who will be featured in Josh Abbey, who is the founder and director of the amazing Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival that comes to us in January. And Josh has created a documentary about students and survivors with a completely different perspective than what's been done before. And what he has done is have students interview survivors, and then have the survivors interview the students to find out what they know. We all know about that principal in Palm Beach or Palm Springs, one of the Palms, who said that the Holocaust didn't happen, and how millennials don't even know where Auschwitz was, but they don't know where anything is, so it doesn't really matter. But Josh has turned that little paradigm on its side by having the survivors interview the kids to find out what they need.
Actually,
Then-
Julian,
Yeah, go ahead.
that's not correct.
Okay, I'm wrong. Go ahead, Josh. Josh Abbey of the Jewish Film Festival.
I made it very simple because normally survivors speak as they did today. And then in the classroom, students will get to ask a few questions. And then in the best of worlds, the teacher will do follow-up lesson plans and continue to teach them more. So my approach was to flip that, to have the survivors ask questions, general, universal questions. What is the Holocaust? Does it have any meaning in your life? Do you and your friends talk about hate and intolerance? Have you ever heard a survivor? 10 questions. And then people like my good friend Ben Lesser, sitting right here, participating. They asked the questions separately. And then I went into the field, and I'm still formulating the film. Just asked young people, 14 to 20, all different ethnicities, all different parts of Las Vegas, at the skate park, in their bedrooms, at schools, the same questions, and they answer them spontaneously. So that's the basic formula, but I also was fortunate to have Sarah and Mitch in dialogue, the two amazing, really important Holocaust education, public education people with us, and they deserve a huge round of applause. So let's applaud them, and then I'll give it back to Joanne.
Josh, do we have the dates for the Jewish Film Festival?
Got your flyer, investment break. I can speak about that.
There are flyers.
Joanne is going to be moderating the opening night film of the Jewish Film Festival, which is January the 9th, Thursday. It's going to be at Tom's Brendan Theaters, and it's called Black Honey, the life of Avram Tzvizkor, who was a partisan and one of the most important Yiddish poets of modern times. And he actually was the only Jew to speak at the Nuremberg trials. And he also immigrated to Israel and was responsible for keeping Yiddish culture alive in Israel after the independence. But Joanne's going to be one of the moderators, along with Bruce Isaacson, who's the former poet laureate, the initial poet laureate of Clark County. So I hope you all come to that. It's free, but it's first come, first served, so come early.
And the Students and Survivor documentary, do we have a date?
I'm sorry. That is it's going to be the closing night film with the Gene Greenberg's documentary as well about his parents, in memory of our fathers, I think it's called. And we're calling our film right now is called Live to Bear Witness.
Live to Bear Witness.
That's on Elie Wiesel's gravestone. It says Live to Bear Witness. And we're all here to live to bear witness.
So many of the survivors will say, because I was allowed to live, I will be a witness. I will keep their memory alive. One of the things that I found moving here from San Francisco, which has an amazing Jewish film festival, is what a delight to find what Josh has done here in Las Vegas. His film festival is the equal of any city in this country. And it's not just for Jewish people to come with me in the audience. It appeals to everybody. So if you have a chance, those 2 weeks in January, do not miss this wonderful film festival. And we're so grateful to Josh for doing that. Okay, is there another question, Anne?
Miriam's poems included in your book. If not, are they available?
I have a poetry book.
Miriam has a poetry book, and we
I
have
have 4 books, a memoir, an art book, a poetry book, and now a book for children.
So if you are interested in any of Miriam's books, please let me know and we'll figure out how to happily get one to you. Thank you, Anne. And yes, there are a couple of her poems in this book. Frequently, people will refer to it as being a children's book. Originally, we had set out to write a book for middle grade students. What we found when adults read it was that they were captivated by the book. And so it no longer is being described as a book for middle school kids, although it works for them. But we hope that adults will find it just as engaging. Is there another question? Michelle?
Just want to answer one, the presentation answered one of my questions regarding the few questions that were on the table. However, I am curious about the flowers, the yellow daffodils that are also on the table.
Eagle Eye, thank you. You might have noticed that on the table on which Angel's work is displayed, there are some yellow paper daffodils. That might look like origami birds, but they are yellow daffodils. The reason I have these yellow daffodils at all of my presentations is because I'm honored to partner with the Poland Museum of the History of the Jewish People in Poland, in Warsaw, to bring presentations and awareness to people in this country about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which is celebrated or commemorated on April 19th, even though it took place weeks before and weeks after. Many people don't know that there were two uprisings in Warsaw. One was of the Jewish ghetto, and one later was of the city of Warsaw. And I do presentations about that. They commemorate this anniversary by having people wear yellow daffodils. How many petals on a daffodil? Just say 6. 6! And it's yellow. And if you think about something with 6 points that's yellow, there were years in Poland and Nazi-occupied Germany where the Mogen David, the Star of David, was a mark of death. By taking that and turning it to a daffodil, which no matter what's going on top of that ground, that daffodil is going to come back up. It's proof of a resurgence of life. There is a song called the Jewish Partisan Song.
Kommen wird doch unser ausgewählte Show. Es wird der Volk in unser Trockner sein Dorf. My favorite stanza. Das Lied geschrieben ist mit Blut und nicht mit Blei. Es ist nicht ein Lied, von der Fee läuft frei. Es soll der Volk zwischen fallen dicke Band. Das Lied gesungen wir mit Paganas in the end. And that stanza means the song was written with blood and not with bled. It is not about a people. It is not about a people who are free. It's about a people whose walls are crumbling. The song was written with guns in hands, and I was in the Jewish partisans. I was the only child. The partisans did not take children in our forest, and because they needed my father, I was the only child in the partisans. And to protect me from rape, because women were so many men and so few women, so many men and so few women. My father, he shaved off my hair. My mother made me boys' clothing. And on my seventh birthday, I got my own pistol of my own, and you could not tell I was a girl for anything. And that's why I made Joanne change the cover of the book, because she had a girl originally, and I was a boy at the party.
As you can see, she's like the Energizer Bunny. Nothing stops Miriam. She is such a role model for all of us, and I'm so grateful to have her here. The last line of the Jewish Partisan Song is, "We are here." It doesn't matter what they did, we are still here. And a year ago in August, I was able to go back to Vilna. We don't call it Vilnius, that's what they call it today. Vilna, Lithuania, the Jewish city that my grandmother left 100 years before. And I was able to do a presentation at the Vilna Jewish Library about anti-Nazi resistance. Now, you guys who know me know I don't believe in spirits and all of that, but they keep coming. They don't accept that I don't believe in them. And so there I was in this building from the 1400s, talking to people, including the ambassador from Spain, about anti-Nazi resistance. And I'm telling you, I could feel my Auntie Rivka and my great-grandma Sarah and everybody else up there going, "You go, girl, because we are here." So, moving on. On your seats is a piece of paper that is very important to me because it gives you the opportunity to give us some feedback on the presentation. Write down if you have any questions that you might not have had a chance to ask. Miriam and I don't have a big-time publisher. Everything we do on our own. I make presentations all over. It would be helpful if somebody could donate airline miles. If you have contacts that might be interested in the presentation, any money that we get from selling the books goes right back into the project. So if you have book clubs or organizations that you can recommend, please write them down. And then if there was a highlight, please let us know what it was. And if there was no highlight, don't bother, because it'll be too depressing. And if you have extra additional comments, we would appreciate your feedback so that we can do a better job next time. And I saw a question, Sandy?
Yes, our book club just wanted to know if you will have the book out like ebook.
Let me just say,
I can't tell people that read it on Kindle.
yeah, hold on. I was honored to speak at the Sun City Summerline Book Club last February, and they asked me to come back this coming February. So thank you to all who schlepped from that side of town, but you might be able to join us again for a slightly different presentation on February 13th at Desert Vista in Sun City Summerline. And now to answer your question, the ebook is being uploaded as we speak. And so I'll say within a week, it should be available. The softcover book is available on Amazon. I would rather that you get it from me instead of giving Amazon a cut. And so if you contact me directly, I'll be happy to sell you a book. And I keep them, you know, it's like those guys that used to have rings inside their trench coat. I have my books with me all the time, and I'm able to sell them at a moment's notice. Okay, are there any other questions? Yes? It is not in large print, but if you can get an ebook, an electronic book, a Kindle book, you can make the font as big as you need it to be. I do have one Women of Valor book left in large print. Ah. Right, that was my only customer. So, Amy, do you have a friend you could give it as a gift? I just turned into Barbara Streisand. I don't know how that works. Right. Okay. Thank you for being such a warm, wonderful,